We have present Councillor Allison, Anderson, Brown, Carmichael, Chalmers, Clark, Convery. Just check to see if we have Councillor Cooper in the meeting. We don't have Councillor Cooper at the moment. We have apologies from Councillor Cowan and Councillor Johnson-Dempsey as substituting. We have present Councillors Devlin, Fagan. I'll just check if Councillor Ferguson-Miller is in the meeting. We have apologies from Councillor Ferguson-Miller. We have present Councillors Frame, Keat, Kerr. I'll check Councillor Lambie is in the meeting. We don't have Councillor Lambie. We have present Councillors Logan, Loudon, McCallan, McClymont, Leslie MacDonald, McLachlan, Nelson, Ray. We have apologies from Councillor Razak, Councillor Cowie is substituting. We have present Councillors Robb, Ross and Shearer, and we have apologies from Councillor Walker and Councillor Handy-Bode substituting. I'll hand back to the Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I just make two observations at the start of the meeting? One is that I think it's the first meeting of the Executive Committee where we're joined by Lindsay McRoberts, the new Executive Director of Education Resources, and I know you all join me in welcoming her to the committee. And we also welcome two returning faces to the committee in new roles, Maureen Chalmers and Ross Clark, as Leader and Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Okay. Can I come to item 1, which are declarations of interest? Are there any declarations of interest? I don't see any, so can I move now to item 2, which are the minutes of the previous meeting? And were there any questions on the minutes of the previous meeting? And can I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thank you. Just to ask if there's any updates on the costs related to the storms, please.
Jackie?
Thank you. Yeah, that's still being collated. As soon as we have it, we'll include it in a future revenue monitoring report. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask that we agree the minutes as a correct record?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Can I come now to item 3, which is a revenue budget monitoring paper, and Jackie Taylor will speak to this item. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This is our regular revenue budget monitoring report. This takes us to the 11th of July this year. At section 4 of the report, we're reporting a projected outturn position is expected on our general services budget. The details of our budget and spend is included in Appendix 1. From section 4.3 on page 22, we are picking up on some key budget issues. Firstly, the pay award, an update on the pay award. Agreement has now been reached on the pay award for our staff group, excluding teachers. I'll come on to that in a second. We've agreed a 4% uplift for the current financial year and 3.5% for 26-27, and funding from the Scottish Government has been provided to support this enhanced pay offer in 25-26. So there's no gap in funding expected for 25-26 in relation to the pay award. However, there are implications for our longer-term budget strategy because of that higher pay award that's been agreed. This was referenced in the budget paper that I presented to the Executive Committee in June. And this adds, in terms of our pay award risk, £16 million onto our core budget pressures. Section 4.4, I'm reporting that the pay offer for teachers is ongoing. Therefore, that remains a risk to our budget position. Section 4.5 of the report picks up on teacher numbers and on the issue of reduced class contact time. You're aware that our mitigations around why our teacher numbers would not increase to previous year levels has now been accepted by the Scottish Government. £4.2 million was included within our budget as an estimated cost if we had to reinstate teacher numbers. Therefore, that level of funding is no longer needed in 25-26, and we're suggesting that that £4.2 million is set aside to support the budget strategy, specifically with a view to helping with that pay award risk that I mentioned a second ago. There is still a risk in relation to the issue of reducing class contact time. Reducing class contact time reduces the level of time that a teacher is in front of the class, and that then means that additional teachers need to be brought into the system, and that has financial implication for councils, including ourselves. COSLA and local government are engaged with the Scottish Government on this matter, and it's been made clear that funding would have to be provided in order for councils to deliver this initiative. If we don't have full funding for reducing class contact time, if it's brought in, then higher levels of savings would be required to be met to balance the council's budget. Section 4.7 picks up on additional funding that we received for additional support for learning. £28 million was made nationally available. A council received £1.8 million of that. Education are finalising how those funds will be spent, and we will report that back to this committee in September. Section 4.8 picks up on packaging extended producer responsibility, again an area where we've reported previously. New waste regulations were brought into force this year, and that's intended to encourage producers of packaging waste to reduce the amount of waste that they produce. This scheme's been managed by DEFRA, and funding's been passed to the council from DEFRA, totalling £7.7 million this financial year. There is a risk that this funding will not continue beyond 25-26 as a benefit to the council due to how this will be reflected in the council settlement going forward. Community Enterprise Resources Committee have approved increased staffing of costing £610,000 over 2 years, and this is to help meet our obligations in relation to this new initiative. The remaining funding of £7.1 million is being allocated to Community and Enterprise Resources budget, and that will meet costs of collecting household packaging waste. That in turn releases core council budget and releases an underspend of £7.1 million. And it's recommended that considerations given to using this underspend to support the budget strategy going forward, specifically in relation to that pay award pressure that I mentioned a second ago. Our budget pressure, including that pay award risk, is over £40 million over the next 2 years. And using this level of underspend means that we are able to reduce the level of saving we need to make over the coming years. As always, the appendices include information around our budgets over services and also our actual and projected spend for the year. But if I take you back to the recommendations on the report at section 2 on page 21, we're asking that the projected break-even position for the general fund and actual spend as at the 11th of July is noted, that the budget of £4.2 million in relation to teacher numbers, that consideration is given to using that to support the budget strategy, be approved. That to note that the proposals for the use of the £1.8 million additional support for learning funding will come back to the September meeting of this committee, and that the anticipated underspend of £7.1 million in relation to waste is considered to be used to support the budget strategy is approved. And finally, that the projected break-even position on the housing revenue account and the actual spend to the 11th of July is noted. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll open this up for questions. Before I do, I just want to say you will see 5 recommendations on the paper. I did say that we would revisit this issue of the £7.1 million. I have to say, I still think we're in a position of requiring additional clarity around that funding, not least around whether the Scottish Government intend to penalise us should we choose to spend it. So for those reasons, I will not move that recommendation and suggest we pick that up at a future meeting. I'll move the others. Are there any questions on this paper? And can I come to Kirsten Robb?
I have an amendment to the Community and Enterprise 7.1 million, so can I ask for clarification if that's still valid to take that?
I think it is still valid, given your... I've been past wording of your amendment just a moment ago. I think it was still legitimate. However, the offer is there to say I'm intending to carry this forward to a future meeting if that would address your concerns. But I'm happy to allow a bit of discussion to take place first if you think that would be useful.
Okay, yeah, I would like to put forward this amendment because it will make a difference to our communities now and hopefully save future money further down the line. So this amendment responds, you can hopefully see it all being sent round soon, responds to the litter and fly tipping issues being raised by our communities and will result in improvements to the environment, good quality items being reused rather than incinerated, and also save our residents money, very important. This £2.1 million that we're proposing as a Clean Up South Lanarkshire proposal represents a triple whammy win for our communities, while still returning over £5 million for future budget pressures. In preparing this amendment, I thank the officers for their advice and thank Ross Clark for their team's valuable input. I also sent an earlier version to Councillor Brown, given his committee role as well. You can read the wording of the amendment, but to be clear, we're proposing 1.750 million for additional staffing and vehicle resources across waste and ground services to provide resilience, which is what we're hearing in communities that the issue is, and tackle litter and fly tipping. 0.050 million for the purchase of larger lidded street bins to boost the bin replacement programme, helping to avoid bin overflow or birds pecking out litter, as I'm sure many of your constituents will tell you. And £250,000 for environmental enforcement to tackle litter and fly tipping, building a larger enforcement team, sending a message with teeth that littering and fly tipping our communities is unacceptable. And then a small amount, 0.05 million, is to assist with communication, including partnership with third sector organisations, to increase awareness of opportunities to reuse and recycle. Many of the alternatives to discarding waste already exist. These are alternatives that can save people money, build new skills, support our third sector, and importantly, save resources on our limited planet. This injection of funding will help communicate these alternatives to people right now, making a difference on our streets and in people's pockets right now. Please support this amendment.
Okay, could I come to Ross Clark?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Jackie for the report. I will be seconding Councillor Robb's amendment. Our residents expect us to get at least the basics right. One of those basics is cleaning up the rubbish. It's one of the fundamental core principles of local government. But it's not just a basic impact. It's not just about tidying up. It's about local pride and local benefits. The people of South Lanarkshire deserve to feel proud of the places in which they live. They deserve clean streets, looked after town centres, public places they can enjoy, and that starts with tackling litter and cracking down on fly tipping. In other words, cleaning up South Lanarkshire. That's why I'd like to thank Councillor Robb for proposing this amendment and working constructively with us on it, and to officers for their guidance. We both believe the funding, or at least a portion of the money coming from the scheme, could and should be used to protect and improve services right now, which is pretty much what the scheme was designed for. We all know litter and fly tipping is a consistent concern of our constituents. I'm sure all of our inboxes reflect that. These investments act on those concerns, creating a Cleaning Up South Lanarkshire fund to help do just that. Strengthening our efforts to tackle these persistent problems that continue to affect the communities we serve. Keeping town and village centres clean does not only provide benefit to local residents, it also benefits visitors and local businesses, ensuring these are welcoming places for people to shop and spend time. There's also that responsibility to protect and enhance our precious natural environment, but it's clear that fly tipping is a threat to those vital efforts. We simply need to get better at enforcement if we want to crack down on the blight that is fly tipping. Extra investment in environmental enforcement will help us to do that. And I've said this before, but it's still true. We believe it's this council's duty to protect South Lanarkshire as a good place to live, work and visit today and tomorrow. So let's align ourselves with the priorities of our constituents. Let's get the basics right. Let's clean up our streets, and please vote for the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Alec Allison?
Perhaps this point as well, but when we were deciding the budget and looking at the possibility of this income, the feeling at that time was certainly we needed to know the amounts and what it covered, etc., and then we would come back to this issue. So I think I'm more, although this is a very useful paper, I'm still not sure where your figures have come from as to whether they will actually be effective in doing what we want. So I think we do need to postpone this, have a discussion and look and see what we can do with it, because just putting it to reserves is not the right idea, I believe, either. And so I think I'm more in line with what you're saying in deferring this at the moment. The other thing was that, if I picked you up correctly, there is some dubiety, can I say, regarding whether this funding will be a positive ongoing or whether it could be reduced from our block grant. Did I pick you up correctly in saying that?
Yes, and I think I
Should
will...
we not then send a letter to the Scottish Government pointing out the importance of this money and what it is new money being raised to do, so that we can do things like what this amendment proposes, but get the values right. That's, for instance, I don't see how 250,000 is going to help fly tipping enforcement. We don't know who's doing it, and that amount of money is not going to make a difference. So I'd be supportive of you deferring this, but I also believe we should be sending a letter enforcing our position on the Scottish Government as to the importance of this new money being retained by councils.
And maybe before I take any more points from the committee, I might ask Jackie to come back on the issues around just the certainty of this funding and the possibility that our grant might be adjusted. Jackie.
Thanks. You're correct. For this current financial year, the government have told us they will not change our block grant because we've had this £7.7 million from DEFRA. It's DEFRA that's providing this funding to us, not the Scottish Government. However, there's no indication or guarantee that into next financial year there'll not be adjustment from the Scottish Government on our block grant. So at this stage, we just don't know what the situation will be.
Okay, could I come to Robert Brown?
Thanks very much, Chair. I don't disagree with really anything that's been said in support of spending money on waste. You can argue about the detail of the direction in which it goes. I think we have to look, however, at some of the principles involved here. We did put a marker down at the time of the budget that we'd look at this later on. We don't yet have clarity on a number of key issues to do with this, and I think that's the reason for continuing it at this moment in time to get that. Hopefully, the view to being able to do some things I think we're all across the board interested in doing. It's important, though, to recognise that we don't have clarity about the ongoing funding, and therefore taking on staff for the sake of argument, we can't guarantee the funding for future years for staff. And that's one of the core reasons why we can't actually agree this at the moment. I think it would be very useful if the SNP opposition group took it up with the Scottish Government to actually guarantee the money for future years, because this is additional money beyond anything that comes from Barnett consequentials or other things towards the Scottish Government's own funding. It's intended for waste-type things, environment, waste-type things in that regard. Frankly, it should be spent on that kind of thing if we can possibly do it. And until the Scottish Government actually give us clarity on whether we can do that in practical terms in future years or not, then we're limited to this £7 million figure for this year. So that's the first point about all of that. The further point is I think we want to look at the strategy on this, because we did put money into the budget in February of this year towards fly tipping. A number of things are taking place with regard to all of that, improving our enforcement arrangements, bringing in place staff members and so forth to do that kind of thing. So money is there already to some degree to do that. The proper approach to this is to look at the figures once we've got a degree of clarity about them. The Scottish Government can help that, and I hope the SNP group will take seriously the idea of getting their colleagues in government to give us that degree of clarity before we go forward on this one. And I think by the time the next meeting comes, we should have the ability to be able to be clear about the implications of this. One thing we don't want to do is to put money into budgets just now, and then we're left with having to effectively take it out again because it's been removed by an unfortunate or unsatisfactory block grant settlement next year. We all know that it's difficult to take it out of education or out of social work, and it lands on community and enterprise as often as not to do this. So the principle, I think, is very clear. This is waste money. It should, if at all possible, be spent on waste. The practicalities, however, this council has to deal with. It's not totally masters of its own destiny. And until we have clarity on some of these things, I don't think we're in a position to progress in that regard. No particular difficulty about the detail. I think we can follow through some of this, but let's deal with it in terms of the waste strategy going forward. I think, therefore, I wish to support the leader's suggestion of moving this forward and having the discussion, hopefully cross-party, between now and then to see what we can come up with in this particular matter. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got a couple more points. It's going to come to Kirsten Robb.
Thank you. It was just to provide answers to some of the questions raised. In terms of where the figures came from, we worked with officers for their advice on those as well. The 250,000 actually just doubles what the administration appear to be proposing. We haven't seen any details of that, but I think you mentioned yourself, Robert, that you're putting money into staffing and so on. So we would just look to double that, to increase it to so that each area of South Lanarkshire can be covered adequately, and as I said, so that our environmental enforcement has the resources and teeth to make an impact here. So that's where that figure came from. 50,000, very simple suggestion on communication. These are the things that will make a difference right now to our community, so that's definitely an easy agree. It's telling people where they can reduce waste, Salvation Army, shelter shops and so on, and they can actually save money in the bulky uplift. So why would we not want to do these things right now? It's quite a simple thing. Lidded street bins, again, everything we've suggested, the majority are one-off funding. So why would we not take the chance now to do these things, taking into account all the risks and things you've talked about this future? That's why we carefully selected one-off funding. The lidded street bins is part of a ongoing programme, and this would just accelerate it. My inbox is full of overflowing bins and birds pecking out waste. So let's take some action to make a difference here in our communities now. And the 1.75 million gives us the additional resources, whether they're vehicles for contingency, because that's another reason why people are saying bulky waste isn't getting collected in time, or fly tipping because vehicles are breaking down. We have selected these things very carefully and in consultation with officers and so on, and having what you said there, Robert, about the staff that you wanted to put in yourselves as an administration. So we're just looking to add that and add teeth to this and to make a difference right now in our communities. So I hope that helps. And in terms of one-off funding and staffing, yourselves as an administration, you've put in frontline first funding for staff. So this is just another example of where this amendment wants to make a difference in our communities, just like the frontline first has put staffing in to make a difference as well on a limited one-off funding basis. So it's consistent with what the administration have done before, and it's well thought out amendment, which we hope you'll be able to support.
Okay, could I come to John Anderson?
Yeah, thanks. Just to clarify on something you said at the start there about where the Scottish Government would be punishing the council if this money isn't used properly. The thing on the web, it says the government has said that the funding should be ring-fenced to improve recycling and waste services. That comes from the UK Government, not from the Scottish Government. It then goes on to say the scheme administrator, PAC UK, will be empowered to reduce future allocations if evidence shows that the funding has been used for other purposes. So when you're having a pop at somebody, don't always have a pop at the Scottish Government, because it's not them that's making these decisions. Thanks.
No, sorry, Councillor Anderson, as usual with your partisan points, you've missed the point. The point I was making is that it has been suggested that the Scottish Government, not the UK Government, may on a recurring basis adjust our block grant to take account of the fact that there is now an income stream for the purposes that you've described coming from DEFRA via the new arrangements. That's the point I was trying to make. It was the point I asked Jackie to explain earlier, yeah, and in response to Alec Allison's question. Right, I'm sorry, somebody's phone's going off. Can somebody check that? I'm just going to see if there's any other points. Can I come to Ian Strachan? Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Just if there weren't any other points, I was maybe just going to clarify something on the motion that you're putting forward. It was just to be clear for the State Committee. I think what you indicated that you're moving 1, 2, 3 and 5. I think you maybe indicated you weren't moving 4, but I was wondering if it was more perhaps that you were noting the anticipated unspend of 7 million and perhaps committee are agreeing to give future consideration to its use to support the budget strategy.
so my intention was just not to move that recommendation, but if it is helpful from just for the point of view of clarity, I suppose I'm noting the anticipated underspend and consideration be given to its use, and probably no more than that, because I think the issue that we have got is we have a recommendation from our officials, and that's the bit we haven't really talked about, which is to say we set this money aside for use in the budget strategy, largely because of the increased gap we're going to experience now as a result of the pay settlement, which is also paying the wages of workers. But we, as an administration, said we wanted to revisit this money when we had more clarity on it, precisely because we wanted to spend it in exactly this waste and sort of community and enterprise space. Can I say, I think these suggestions, I appreciate the suggestions that have come forward, I appreciate the way in which they've come forward. Councillor Robb is right, it is exactly the kind of thing the administration ourselves have been considering. I'm just reluctant to make a commitment on the expenditure just now when there is still this uncertainty out there. And I think the point that was made by Councillor Brown that I would just reiterate is that if we find we have expanded our budget gap, and I want to recognise that the proposals there don't use the full 7 million, they do use a part of it, but if we put forward proposals that expand that budget gap, then it is very likely that community and enterprise and the services that are responsible for keeping the place clean and tidy, that have been under enough pressure due to all the years of government cuts that we've had to soak up as a local authority, then it is very likely that those are the areas that will come forward in a budget pack and be put forward again for councillors' consideration. And those are services that we are trying to protect. And I think there is a point, we have put in place one-off funding, and I believe we did the right thing, and I appreciate the sentiment behind the proposals here. I think if we really want to properly address these issues, what we need are good recurring funding settlements that allow us to staff up on an ongoing and predictable basis over multiple years. I wasn't going to take any more points, but I can see I've now got one from Councillor Loudon.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's just for some clarity on what's happening with the removal of this recommendation. I'm a bit puzzled why, since you have the power as Chair to remove parts from papers and recommendations before they came to committee, we've got to this stage where you're asking for the removal of that recommendation just now. I would also like some clarity about whether or not you're putting in a formal amendment to the paper that's before us. And to pick up on a third and final point, you'd said that this will come back for future consideration. Can I ask for future consideration by whom? Did you mean by the Executive Committee? And if so, will this be coming to us at the next executive meeting, as Councillor Brown seemed to suggest a wee while ago?
Right. I think a future meeting of this committee, because we get regular updates on our budget as the budget strategy develops. The proposal is there in terms of supporting budget strategy for precisely the reason that to an extent we are dealing with the same amount of money, and it's just a question of how do we kind of tackle it, how do we deploy it? Because, as I say, if we spend this money now and it's not available in the budget strategy, then we're just going to see deeper cuts. So those issues are all interrelated. And your first question was? Oh, the amendment. Sorry, it was about the amendment. Sorry, that's fine. Well, I thought the way to deal with that would be just not to move recommendation 4 and just deal with the other points, because what I'm basically suggesting is we hold that in abeyance. But I think Ian Strachan, as the monitoring officer, is just looking for a bit of clarity on that. And so if you're looking for particular wording, I'm just proposing that the anticipated underspend of 7.1 million, 7.106 million in the core council budget be noted, and that consideration of its use be taken forward to a future meeting of the Executive Committee. Okay. That's not a touch screen, is it? No, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. So just for clarity, so we're keeping proposal 4, but we're noting that it's in there.
you simply note the underspend and we'll give consideration to its use at a future meeting.
Okay. My first question actually hadn't been that. My first question was about why you hadn't removed this from the paper or changed that before the papers had come to us, given that you've got the power to do this. It seemed to only happen after an amendment appeared.
Well, no, because we did say we would return to the subject, and I think we can still consider this as part of the budget strategy. I think the issue is, do we deal with it now or do we deal with it as part of the budget strategy? And in the spirit of consensus, being the consensual and inclusive leader that I am, I'm choosing a compromise that I think that the committee might choose to agree to. I think there's common ground there across all of you.
No, sorry, I'm confused with this. So we're not dealing with this until the budget now. I thought this is coming back to us at the next meeting of the executive.
There is a suggestion there, if we accepted the paper, that we could deal with this as part of the budget strategy. Our officials are making a particular suggestion about using that to deal with the fact that we have a bigger pay gap. I'm making the point that these issues are all interrelated. We have a commitment going back to when we approved the budget to say we would revisit this. And in terms of the timing of how we deal with this, I think, and given the discussions that we've had within the administration, given the discussions that we're clearly having today, there is a willingness to deal with this, I think, separately from the budget strategy. It's the same subject matter, it's the same amount of money, but I think there's still a need for clarity on the government's intentions, and I'm suggesting rather than pick that up as part of the budget process, we can deal with this in future papers that come to this committee where we're developing a budget strategy anyway. Okay? Has peace broken out? Or are we going to, I suppose, if my proposal becomes the motion, would you intend to press the amendment, or would you be willing to accept that? Sorry, Councillor Robb.
I'd like to put forward the amendment because it can have an impact now for our communities. Thanks.
That's fine. I think Councillor Allison, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not trying to string things out, but I wonder if it wouldn't be beneficial for there to be a round table, if you like, with all the parties away from the executive to discuss how we deal with this funding. As you said, I mean, the working group doesn't exist at the moment. Would that be helpful for all parties to meet and identify the best use to bring forward a collaborative agreement to the next executive? Would that help?
It could help, potentially. I think what we want to do is get clarity first on what the government's intentions are, and then I'd be happy to pick this up with the leaders in advance of an executive committee if my motion is accepted. Okay, I don't see any other points, so can we move this now to a vote? So the motion will be the recommendations as they are in front of you, with the exception of recommendation 4, which will be as I've just described, and the amendment will be from Councillor Robb, seconded by Councillor Clark, and my motion will be seconded
by myself,
by Councillor Convery. Sorry, Councillor Carmichael. No.
Sorry. No, I didn't want to speak. Sorry about that. I'm just getting confused here with this.
All right, okay, sorry. Right, okay, we'll just take a moment to set this up, and we'll begin a vote in just a moment.
Can I just ask all members to make sure they've entered the meeting on the delegate unit? The numbers have been jumping about a bit, so I'm just going to make sure we've got the right amount of votes, okay? I'm just going to start the voting.
We will need to press enter meeting to get into the vote.
We're just waiting on one more member voting. Still waiting on one more member voting. Is there anybody having any issues? Please let me know. Councillor Cooper, you're the person that we're waiting on to vote. If you're having any technical issues? Oh, I think we've got the vote in now. Just double check before we go ahead. Right, I'll just stop the vote. We have 17 votes for the motion, 11 votes for the amendment and no abstentions. The motion is declared carried. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and we will pick up the points that arise from that. And I meant to say to Councillor Allison, I think we will write to the Scottish Government as well to press them on the clarity that he was looking for to prevent any further dirty cuts to council budgets. Okay, can we move now to item 4? And Jackie, we're still with you.
Thank you. This is now our capital budget monitoring report for the same period as the last report. So this has taken us to the 11th of July. Section 4 of the report reports that the General Fund Capital Programme is £73.8 million for this year. This includes proposed adjustments that are attached to Appendix 1, which we'll cover in a second. Over on page 28, giving an update on the Delivering and Enabling Commercial Space programme. You may recall that £11 million has been awarded to the Council from the City Deal Infrastructure Fund. Community and Enterprise Resources have identified projects at Cathcart Road, Rutherglen, Red Tree Labs, Shawfield Innovation Campus and Industrial Unit Upgrade and Retrofit. We're currently developing business cases and spend profiles for these projects, and once that is complete, we will bring those projects into our capital programme. Section 4.6 picks up on the Vacant and Derelict Land Fund. The Community and Enterprise Resources Committee have approved allocation of the 25-26 fund for Clyde Cycle Park, £400,000, and the Clyde Climate Forest, £25,000. There was already an allocation of £200,000 within the Council's capital programme for the Clyde Cycle Park, and that can now be replaced by that VDLF allocation. So that then allows us to adjust our capital programme. At 4.9, picking up the Leisure and Cultural Transformation Fund, this is the £13 million that was set aside to improve assets in the leisure space. There was a balance of unallocated monies, and a list of projects has now been identified to utilise these funds, and they are included in Appendix 1 for consideration. The forecast for the year on our capital programme is that we will fully spend our programme. Our housing programme is detailed at section 5. We have £87.7 million of a capital programme for housing this year. That includes funding from the Scottish Government for a National Acquisition Programme. And at 5.3, I'm reporting that there's been a realignment of funding between our registered social landlords and the council, with the council picking up more funding than originally anticipated. Our actual spend position for the housing programme is detailed at 5.6. We've spent £14.3 million to date. The amendments to the programme is detailed at Appendix 1 on page 31. A couple to pick up on. You can see over the 3 pages all of the proposed amendments. On page 31, at the bottom of the page, the Cultural and Leisure Transformation Fund projects are detailed there. We've got White Moss Pitch in East Kilbride. We've got a digital inclusion project that's picking up digital support hubs and lending libraries. That's been developed through our digital inclusion group. We've got the floating floor at Hamilton Water Palace that requires to be fixed, and we've got a number of priority projects that are detailed at the bottom of page 31, which makes a difference to usable spaces in the leisure facilities. Over the page on page 32, included within the adjustments are funds around Place-Based Investment Fund, which is detailed there just at the second paragraphs of that page, £1.2 million that's been received. That programme of spend will move into 26-27, reflecting the projects that were being delivered from that funding. We've also got additional money around People and Place Local Authority grant, and this is to promote initiatives around active travel journeys. And we also have money from SPT on congestion measures, and they're detailed on page 32. And over on page 33, we've got funding from the Net Zero Investment Fund that was put in place as part of our previous council budgets, and you can see projects there around LED for John Wright Sports Centre, some work at Hallside Primary School and feasibility studies for mini heat networks in Curluke and East Kilbride. In terms of the other appendices within the report, you can see details of funding that the council will receive and also spend over resources for capital programmes. If I take you back to the recommendations, we're asking that the position on the General Fund programme and the Housing programme, as at the 11th of July is noted, that the adjustments that are in Appendix 1 to the General Fund be approved, and that will continue to monitor the programme through the Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions on this paper? Could you please indicate now? Not seeing any questions, so can we agree the recommendations? Thank you very much. Come now to item 5, which is an update on funding, and we're still with you, Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. Again, a regular report to this committee on funding that we've received. Details are included in Appendix 1 and 2. You can see in Appendix 1 these as revenue funds that we've received. Firstly, in relation to Scottish Milk and Healthy Snack Scheme, this is an annual amount that we receive, just over £1 million, to continue to deliver that service. We have funding for Bright Start Breakfast, £146,000 that will go towards our breakfast clubs and equipment in particular over all of our breakfast clubs. And we received money that allows us to pay a minimum rate of pay to children's social care staff in commission services. On page 40, we have capital funding, both of which I mentioned a second ago as part of our capital paper. We've got our place-based investment fund and also SPT regional congestion reduction funds. So that is for noting. Thank you.
Sorry, we are agreed on that. Did everyone hear that? Right, okay. So we've agreed item 5. Could I come now to item 6, which are the local action fund proposals, and I will come to Ian Strachan to speak to this item. Ian.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good morning. So the purpose of the report to seek the approval of committee in respect of proposals in relation to further spend from the local action fund for those wards that weren't approved at the June meeting of the committee. We have 4 wards where there's agreed proposals from the ward members. Those are detailed in Appendix 1. Just a note in respect of Ward 11, Rutherglen South, the costings of members' proposals, that those are being finalised, so proposing that authority is delegated down to the Executive Director to finalise those in consultation with the ward members and the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee. So we're asking the committee to approve those proposals in Appendix 1. For Clydesdale East Ward 3, deliberations continue, proposing to bring a report back to a future meeting of the committee. The committee will also see that there are 5 wards where there's more than one proposal from ward members for the use of the fund. Those are set out in Appendix 2. I would just note that in respect of Ward 11, Rutherglen Central North, one of the proposals for the construction and maintenance of public toilet is not deemed competent and there'll be ongoing revenue consequences, which isn't funded. There is the possibility of a local comfort scheme being established. I know that members have had discussions about that, which could be explored further. Going to the recommendations, asking committee to approve that the proposals for local action fund in Appendix 1 be approved. That authority be delegated to the Executive Director in respect of Ward 11 in consultation with those members. To note that proposals for Clydesdale East will be brought back to a future meeting. And as there's more than one proposal for the remaining 5 wards, as detailed in Appendix 2, that consideration be given by the committee and a decision taken to approve a proposal in respect of each of those wards. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. before I come to the how we actually dispose of the business here, I shall just mention in a minute, Ian has indicated he's happy to take any questions just now. So are there any questions? And then I think we'll maybe just talk through a process for resolving what's in front of us. So can I come to Richard Nelson?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just in Larkhall Ward 20, and I've just noticed that Holy Cross is not part of the schools. I wasn't involved in the original. We were actually looking at the alternative for the running track. So it's just because Holy Cross is part of, and pupils from Larkhall will go to Holy Cross. So I'm just wondering why Holy Cross is missed from that, because it is part of the education.
I think where similar proposals have been made, the wards councillors, if I think my own ward, for example, I think the ward councillors have agreed within the geographical boundary of the ward has been the extent of the proposals, and that the catchments don't always align. In that case, the secondary school catchments don't align. They don't always align with the geography of the ward. Are there any questions for Ian just now? Okay. So in terms of the proposals, can I just say at the outset, I am keen to have this resolved as really as soon as we can. I have to say I appreciate the spirit in which councillors across the parties have engaged with this. I think there was some concern at the outset, but I've got to say it has proved to be a really positive and worthwhile exercise, and I think there is a great deal of goodwill towards these funds as they've been allocated. So thank you to everyone who's engaged in the process in good faith. There are, if I take the recommendations 1 to 3, could I ask if the committee are minded to agree those recommendations before we come to the recommendations under item 4? Would the committee be content to approve those recommendations? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Sorry, I've got Councillor Clark.
Not a disagreement, Chair, just to make a brief comment on the Larkhall proposal that welcome what's in the paper here. Obviously, Councillor Nelson and I had submitted the proposal for the running track, but it's really good to see that there is that kind of in there to look at alternative funding. It's better sought through those alternative sources rather than the local action fund, because it's certainly a worthwhile project. Would allow the running track to be upgraded to a proper standard, and the floodlighting would allow it to be used at kind of all times of the year and into the evening. So, of course, with that proposal being withdrawn, I'm happy to support the remaining one for Larkhall.
Okay, and I think that's a good example of where these discussions have prompted people to bring forward good suggestions. And also, sometimes if the local action fund hasn't been the way to resolve it, it has led to a conversation about other sources of funding or other ways of tackling issues. And I think there have been a lot of problem-solving conversations in local wards that have been created by the discussions prompted by the action fund. So it's very encouraging to hear, and I thank all the Larkhall councillors for the for their engagement and the constructive way in which they've approached this. So I've got Councillor Frame in a second, but I just want to, before I take Councillor Frame, I am going to come to all the wards under recommendation 4 individually. But if I can deal with, what I'll do in a moment is just ask if we're minded to accept recommendations 1 to 3. But could I come to Councillor Frame?
Hi Joe, thanks Chair. Listen, it's okay, my conferral had cut out at the start of you speaking, so I didn't catch it, but I understand now that you were still to discuss Ward 5, so I do apologise, I'll come back in then, Chair.
You're quite all right. My intention is to take these individually, but before I do that, can I just ask for the committee's agreement to take the first 3 recommendations? Are we in agreement?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Okay. If we now come to recommendation 4, you'll see there is a 4A, B, C, D and E, and my suggestion is that we take these individually. Now, the proposals that are still to be agreed are in Appendix 2 of your paper. There are two proposals. If I come to, in the first instance to Clydesdale North, there are two proposals. The first proposal is that £50,000 be used for play park improvements within the ward. The second is that £30,000 be used for play park improvements and £20,000 for spring bulb and perennial planting within the ward. Is there, I'm just, I suppose, going to take this point. Are there any kind of comments on this before I ask the committee to vote? So my suggestion would be that the first proposal, I'd make that the motion that the first proposal be agreed to. Is the committee in agreement with that, or is there an alternative?
Agreed.
Agreed. Sorry, Councillor Robb.
I just wanted to ask on the second proposal. Obviously, I don't know who's proposed what, but just whenever you look at grants or investments, it's always like the sustainability of them. You know, have they got the permission of the people? Obviously, I'd love spring bulbs and perennial planting and play park improvements, but it's about the maintenance and sustainability. Have they spoken to grounds? Where will they be planted? Who's planting them? Will they, you know, ensure that the bulbs survive grass cutting and so on? Is all that liaison being done just to work out the detail as well? You know, to think about the detail of the grants, has that all been worked out? So if whoever votes for it can be assured that those things are going to happen and it's all worked out.
Ian.
Yeah, I mean, that would be taken forward operationally. I mean, it isn't something that's currently done, but that was the proposal from one of the proposals put forward, but there has been engagement with the service.
Councillor Chalmers.
Propose the second proposal, please. Yep. Yep.
Sorry, this has happened twice now. Sorry, the first proposal will be the £50,000. That will be the motion used for play park improvements within the ward. The second proposal will be the £30,000 plus the £20,000 for spring bulb and perennial planning. So the motion will be the first proposal. Okay. We're going to test this in a moment. Right, okay. I'm saying the motion in the amendment. I am just told that your online voting has been designed to show you first proposal and second proposal. So the technology and what our capabilities appear to be moving forward. However, I think this is going to be a bit of a pilot in how the rest of the meeting is going to go. So in a moment, we're going to start the vote, and the options will be the first proposal and the second proposal. Okay?
We're just waiting on one member. That's all the votes in, so I'll stop the voting. We have 16 votes for the first proposal and 12 votes for the second proposal with no abstentions, so the first proposal is carried.
Okay, thank you. That appeared to work. So if I can move now to the next item, which is there are two proposals. The first proposal is that £50,000 be allocated as a grant to Hollandbush Golf Course for use as a CAT transition fund. The second proposal is that £50,000 be allocated to Blackwood and Kirkmuir Hill Resilience Group to support local youth development. I would like to move the second proposal.
I'll second it.
is the committee in agreement, or does anyone wish to move the first proposal?
Agreed.
So I think we're in agreement then, without the need for a vote, that we will adopt the second proposal. Okay, thank you. Can I come now to Avondale and Stonehouse? Can I say I have received a request from Councillor Cooper to carry this set of proposals forward to the next meeting of the committee. As you're aware, we're already carrying forward item 3 because we do not yet have any proposals for Clydesdale East because there are still discussions taking place with the road service. I'll bring in Councillor Frame just now, but rather than put that one to a vote, I was going to ask if the committee were content to carry that forward to the next meeting, given that we're having this paper will be returning in some form to deal with the issue of Clydesdale East. So, Councillor Frame, can I come to yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As a councillor for Ward 5, I don't want this to be carried forward to a future meeting. I'd rather this was went on this meeting. I have had a lot of talking with different residents and constituents, and I think it's went on long enough now, and we need to come to an end. Thank you.
That's fine. Were there any other questions there? Sorry.
No.
Councillor Robb.
I was just going to make a suggestion, having a look at these. Some of them are quite eligible for REF funding, and I was maybe a consideration could be to look at any that aren't eligible for REF funding. I know there's quite a lot of REF funding for this area, and maybe try and fund those and then support the groups to apply. Like you said, there's some good ideas come out there to apply for to REF for the rest of them, so everyone gets a bit.
Yeah. I think that was part of the logic in suggesting that the item could be carried forward, and maybe there's common ground. And where other areas that it wouldn't be appropriate to fund out of one fund, similar to Larkhall, perhaps we find another potential solution. So I would be minded to move that item is carried forward to the next meeting. Councillor Frame would like the issue dealt with just now. So can I ask, would the committee be minded to carry that forward to the next meeting?
Yes.
Or no? Or would you want? I'm just looking for, or the intention to be to move it, and we'll have some kind of vote on dealing with it just now. So I would move them to carry it forward to the next meeting. Councillor Loudon.
Hi, thanks, Chair. It was just a query on why Councillor Cooper had asked for it to be put forward to the next meeting. Was it about any of these in particular? Any of the been able to find other funding streams, or was there another reason that one was being carried forward? Just for a bit of clarity on it, thanks.
I can't speak for Councillor Cooper, but I think there is there's one of the organisations. I think there's potentially a consensus around one of the organisations, and there is just potentially scope for councillors having a discussion to arrive at some kind of revised proposal that would avoid the proposals being put up against each other. That is my understanding. I see a number of people want to come in just now, so can I come to? I'll take these points very quickly. So, Councillor Frame.
Thanks, Chair. I have obviously been thinking about it when you've been talking, and I would like to ask if on this meeting, if it can be in the minutes, that I have asked if possible, then could we have an arranged meeting with both councillors, so about all councillors from Ward 5, but have an arranged meeting so that we can come to some conclusion on this. Thank you.
I think that would be the sensible thing to do if we're going to defer it, would be to give the local councillors the opportunity to reach an agreement. There is some overlap within your proposals. So
yeah, no, I'd be happy with that, Chair. It's just obviously previously to this, I had tried to conduct meetings and it wasn't always possible. So obviously we can maybe arrange for it to be a more professional meeting that we can get it all sorted out. Thanks.
Right, that sounds like peace is broken out. So I will ask. I see Ian Strachan's taking note. We'll convene a meeting with the local councillors in advance of this coming back to committee. So we agreed that that's how we'll deal with Avondale and Stonehouse. We're agreed. Come now to East Kilbride West. There are two proposals. The first proposal is that £50,000 be used for accessible play park improvements within the ward. The second proposal is that £45,000 be used for accessible play park improvements within the ward and £5,000 for the planting of fruit trees. There are two proposals. I would like to move the first proposal.
I'll second it.
Are we in agreement? Is there anyone dissenting? I don't see any sorry, could I come to Councillor Robb?
I'm happy to propose the second if the maintenance of the trees are included.
Okay.
And if that's all been thought through.
Okay. Do you have a seconder? I'm not seeing a seconder, so I think on that basis, I think I'll move the first with, I think Councillor Convery is a seconder. I think the first proposal is agreed to. Agreed. Come now to the final proposal, which is the 12th item. No, it's not. It's ward number 12, Rutherglen Central and North. Can I say I have also had a request from Councillor Lennon that this be continued to the next meeting, and I believe the reason for that is that there is progress in discussing the issue of a comfort scheme that may be a much more affordable way of delivering the facilities that at Overton Park without the construction and maintenance of a public toilet, and indeed a competent way, and it may well be a means that councillors can reach agreement on. My suggestion would be that we take a similar approach to Ward 12, Rutherglen Central North, as we just did for Ward 5, Avondale and Stonehouse. Can I see that Councillor Brown wants to come in, so can I come to Councillor Brown?
Yes, I just wanted a bit of guidance. I chair Rutherglen 900, which is mentioned in one of the proposals, and I just wanted to be clear that if it's been continued, I don't think there's an issue, but do I have a conflict of interest? I think it's at least a transparency statement, which I'm happy to make, but I seek guidance from Ian, perhaps, on whether there's a conflict of interest there.
As ever, Councillor Alderman, it's a matter of individual determination. At the least, a transparency statement would seem sensible. You might want to err on the side of caution, but ultimately it's a matter of personal responsibility.
Well, for the moment, I'll make a transparency statement, if I may see how the thing goes after that. I don't want to be landed in a funny position, but by the same token, I've got no personal interest in it. It's just the chairmanship of a body.
Okay. Can I come to Councillor Loudon?
Oh, there we go. Thanks, Chair. In the absence of Councillor Cowan, I'd like to speak on behalf of the second proposal, which she'd asked me to do. I would not be in favour of referring this to a future committee for the reasons I'm about to put forward. When Councillor Cowan and Councillor Kalikas put forward these proposals for the Local Action Fund, they were put together in consultation with local community groups, and they simply asked these community groups what it was that they needed and worked with that. And their proposal tries to encompass as wide a demographic as possible here, as you'll see, right from preschool through to our senior citizens, providing funding for 3 primary schools, for the highbacks, which do fantastic work down there, teenagers via Universal Connections, a local men's group, again via the highbacks, and our local community carers who are celebrating their 30th anniversary in Rutherglen this year, who provide arts and crafts sessions for those living with Alzheimer's. And as Councillor Brown has just said, the proposal also provides funding for Rutherglen 900 to spend directly on community projects, which could include a comfort scheme or something else, depending on the community's wishes. So I think there still is the opportunity to bring Councillor Lennon's ideas through there. As all of us know, many of our community groups are clinging on by a thread at the moment. So the Councillor Kalikas and Cowan's proposals were to give them a helping hand to continue doing the great work which they currently do in the community. So I'd urge everyone to support that second proposal. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to speak speak on behalf of another councillor as such, but I think the direction of travel that this is heading in is one that would allow almost all of that second proposal to come to fruition alongside a comfort scheme. And it's potentially one that all 3 councillors in the ward could find that they're in agreement with. but if it's your intention to press the item, then we will put it to a vote. So I would move for, sorry, I think Councillor Brown could have come. Councillor Brown.
I'm sorry, I'm obviously being difficult on this one. I just wanted to state I would not vote on this one, I think, given the circumstances. I hope that's sufficient to keep the transparency thing alive, as it were.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I then suggest that, oh, sorry, Councillor Cowie.
I'm on the Rutherglen 900 group, so I'll not vote on this one either.
Okay. Ian, you content with that, or would you make any further?
Well, I
give
think
any
if you're
further
going to
advice?
recuse yourself, strictly speaking, you should leave. Unfortunately, that's my advice as monitoring officer. I was going to come back to process, but if there's any other contributions.
Before we do that, I think if you want to leave just now, I think that'd be quite. It would be in order, and we'll bring you back in just a second. Okay. Councillor. Yeah. Okay. Ian.
Yeah, okay. So I think, just to be clear, maybe then different to the other proposals, is that I think what you are moving, Chair, is to defer consideration of the LAF for this ward to a future meeting, but that I think what Councillor Loudon, maybe seconded by Councillor Clark, is proposing that committee approve the second proposal. So it's deferment against the second proposal.
So I think, keep me if I'm right, are we going to see first and second appear? No, we're back to motion and amendment. Right, okay. So we're back to motion and amendment. So the motion will be that we defer this to the next meeting. The amendment will be that the second proposal as set out by Councillor Loudon is approved. And I will move that with Councillor Convery as a seconder, and I think Ian has spotted that Councillor Clark will be Councillor Loudon's seconder. Okay, we'll begin the vote just shortly.
Just waiting on 2 members to vote. Just waiting on 1 member now. Still waiting on 1 member. Could I ask if you're abstaining if you press the abstention option? We're still waiting on 1 member. Anybody having any issues? Anybody online? That's all the votes in now, thank you. We have 13 votes for the motion and 13 votes for the amendment.
So I think on that basis, and Ian can keep me right, I think it will go to the casting vote of the chair, and I will vote for the motion.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay. So the motion is carried. Look, thank you very much for your patience with that item, and could somebody maybe retrieve our 2 councillors? And no, but thank you very much for your patience in that item, and I'd encourage the wards where those further discussions are to take place to try and reach an agreement before the next meeting. Okay, so can we come now to item 7, which is the approval, administration and approval of firework control zones. However, I just see that before I do that, I have Councillor Ross. Councillor Ross.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Is there any chance of a comfort break before we go on to the next item? Thanks.
Yes, we'll take a comfort break. Take a quick 5-minute comfort break. I'll make a start now with the meeting and we'll resume the live stream. Coming to item 7, which is the administration approval of firework control zones in South Lanarkshire. Jonathan Reid is going to speak to this paper. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning all. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the requirements of the firework control zones within the Fireworks and Pyrotechnical Articles Scotland Act 2022 and seek approval for the proposed approval process relating to these. Recommendations set out in Section 2 are that the overview of the requirements relating to the Act be noted and that the proposed approval process for the zones in South Lanarkshire as detailed in Section 6 be approved. The background to this stems from new legislation introduced by the Scottish Government, introduced a range of measures to help local authorities and their community safety partners curb some of the disorder relating to fireworks across Scotland. And a key aspect to this legislation being the introduction of firework control zones. Section 4 provides an overview of firework control zones, what they are, who are able to establish one and for what reasons, the who being the council or the community groups, and for what reasons set out in Section 4.5. And in Section 5 of the report, we cover the current position in South Lanarkshire, with well-established processes across the council and its community safety partners to coordinate a range of preventative and reactive actions in relation to fireworks and bonfires as well. Through this approach and the considerable conversations with partner organisations, we've identified at 5.3 of the report that there is no current requirement for a firework control zone to be introduced by the council in South Lanarkshire. This will be kept under review and treated as another tool, really, as part of that preventative and reactive work that we do in conjunction with Police Scotland and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service when it comes to managing and monitoring firework-related disorder. That said, we still have to introduce a process to allow both the council and community groups, established community groups, to come forward with any ideas or suggestions for where they think a firework control zone might be an appropriate place to have one. And at Section 6, we set out that mechanism to do that, a proposed approval process. So that proposes to utilise the existing established structure for bonfires and fireworks, allowing an assessment to be conducted by officers in the first initial basis, with then a report to committee to recommend whether or not a zone should be introduced. Given the implications this can have locally and the geographical nature of firework control zones, it's proposed that area committees would be used to make this final decision. And we've set out at 6.9 that in order to facilitate this, a change would be required to the terms of reference for the council, which we propose to take forward on the 1st of October 2025. The next steps set out in Section 7, so subject to approval from Executive Committee. The administrative arrangements contained in the report to amend Section 3 of the Terms of Reference for the Council Committees and Associated Forums will be progressed, as I said, to the full Council on the 1st of October. And then we'll continue to monitor the impact and the incidents relating to fireworks in conjunction with our colleagues in Police Scotland and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and wider community safety partners. And any changes to our current position on whether to implement one will be taken forward through this process. The Council's website will also be updated to allow any established community groups who are interested in submitting an application for a firework control zone to enable them to do so as well. I'll draw committee back to the recommendations of the report. One, that the overview of the legislation and the proposed process be noted, and then the proposed approval process be approved. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jonathan. Can I ask if there are any questions on the paper? And can I come to Cal Johnson-Dempsey?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the paper, Jonathan. I've spoke with various groups about this, and I think it's fair to say that public opinion either has turned or is turning against private firework use. So I know that a lot of South Lanarkshire residents will really welcome these zones. I have a few questions though. Firstly, I can see in this paper, I can't see in this paper how long it would take to implement firework control zones. 6.3 just says within timescales and guidance. I vaguely remember an issue either last year or the year before where Glasgow City Council tried to implement one of these zones but made an error in not giving enough notice of their order to take effect. Are we working on the assumption that no firework control zone will be in place for this year's bonfire night or maybe even this New Year's? Secondly, I can see at 9.1 that there is an estimated cost of just shy of £25,000 to implement a zone. I kind of struggle to see where that level of cost comes from. So I just appreciate if you could expand on where it comes from. Are we talking mostly about officer time here? And is that only cost to the council or to other public bodies as well? 9.2 mentions that some Scottish Government funding to cover this is available. What level of funding are we talking about there? And would the size of the zone have an impact on the costs of implementing it? Finally, I can see at 6.3 that zones can either be proposed by the council itself or by established community groups. What's the barrier of established here? My understanding from the guidance was that any 20 residents could propose a zone, not just groups. So how do we intend to promote to the public? I know you mentioned the website, but how do we intend to promote to the public that they can bring these proposals? I know there was a lot of questions there, so I'm happy to come back if we miss anything.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
Great, thanks, Councillor. Absolutely. So how long will they take is when we're aligning with the guidance as it says in the report. So the guidance suggests that it'll take 32 weeks for any zone to be implemented from the point of application. So that's time for the council to initially consider it. So that first officer consideration, to respond to the group that applied for it. And then the big part of that, and the reason why it takes that long, is there's a 12-week consultation period. So a bit like anything that the council's looking to put in place, a public consultation has to happen. So that's a 12-week process. And then there's various weeks either side of that where there'd be notification that provided on the website. So the example you provide for the other local authority area is a classic example of making sure that the process is followed in line with the guidance that's set out. So in relation to this year's bonfire night, no, there won't be any firework control zones implemented for that. We're far too close to that to happen. And at New Year, it's obviously getting closer to that as we go on. We are aware, however, that this is a year-round process, so this isn't just going to cover, whilst fireworks perhaps are the biggest issues in October and November, they happen all year round. So some of the reasons set out section 4.5 of the report in relation to animal welfare in particular, you might see that somebody wants to introduce a firework control zone all year round if they're having issues for that. So the process will be open at all times. It's not just going to open for a certain period in the year. The points around finance you raised, so the 25,000 or approximate cost to introduce a zone, that comes again from the Scottish Government, who have done an assessment on the impact to local authorities from that. So we're using their own figures for that one. And that is as you say, in relation to officer time in the broad sense of things. It's also the consultation arrangements, so the publication materials, things like that you would have to do, depending on the level of and how detailed the consultation you want to have. And that will be dependent on each zone and what it covers. There may be a lot of businesses in certain zones. There may be a lot more residential premises in certain zones. So you want to make sure that you're consulting as much as possible with all those that are potentially going to be impacted by that. And in relation to the funding from the Scottish Government, they've set aside an amount that can, I think, cover about 20 firework control zones to be issued across this year, across Scotland. So it's first come, first serve, I understand, as if anybody puts their hand up and says we're implementing one. They are doing it in stage payments, so even if you're taking it through consultation without actually implementing the zone, so if you do the full consultation, that costs you money, but then the zone doesn't actually become live, there's still an ability to claim some of the costs back for that one as well. So what they have said is it's only available this year. They haven't agreed any funding for future years, so there could be a recurring cost to the council once this process goes live that we have to fund fully ourselves for future years. But we'll certainly keep an eye on the level of applications coming in and potential costs that may be attributed to them as well. Then finally, on established community groups, I think that was the last of your questions. So, yep, again, we're aligning ourselves with the guidance on this one. So it's 20 or more. So this very much aligns with the community asset transfer process and the other processes that we have in the council where a community group can apply and the council would take forward that application. So the exact definition, we can get that across to you after committee, but it is very much aligned with the existing processes that we've already got in that kind of commonly referred to definition of what is a community group.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not seeing Councillor Johnson Dempsey coming back, so thank you for that. Could I come to Davy McLachlan?
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question I have, it's a point of information. In my role as the chair of the Safer South Lanarkshire Board, this has been discussed at length with Police Scotland, and the previous divisional commander, Stevie Dolan, made it very clear that if any firework control zones were introduced, it would be impossible for Police Scotland to enforce these because they just simply don't have the resources, like every other organisation that they're experiencing reducing resources. So they're at a loss, and that's straight from the divisional commander as to how we would control these so-called control zones. So that's just a point of information there, Chair.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Can I come to Alec Allison?
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate this is something we'll have to go through with the legislation. Davy has just answered part what my second question is, was how we were going to be able to enforce these, because there's no point in putting rules in place if you can't enforce them. So if the police are not going to be able to deal with this, we're only creating bureaucracy for the sake of it. The first question I was going to ask actually was around what are the criteria for one of these zones, because there's nothing that I can see in the papers that actually identifies what the decisions are going to be based on. And if you don't know that, how do you know what to put in your application? But Davy's point about it not being enforceable, I think, makes the whole thing redundant.
Okay, Jonathan.
Thanks, Councillor. So I'll take your second point first. So as Councillor McLaughlin highlighted, and through discussions at Safe South Lanarkshire Board, and the guidance, it's for Police Scotland to enforce. It's not for the Council to enforce. I suppose whilst Police Scotland have highlighted concerns in their ability to force right across the country, it's the same as any other issue, I suppose. So if we're getting to the stage where we think a firework control zone is needed, then the level of disorder has increased quite significantly to get to that stage. It's higher than it is just now. So like any activity, any level of disorder, police, council, and what other community safety partners react to that. So if it's coming to that stage, then the police have said that they would look to reorganise resources to be able to deal with that. So it's just another tool that somebody has to be able to say, right, okay, we've got an issue. This is one of the ways that we can deal with that. So it's not going to be a catch-all solution, and the government themselves, even at the introduction of the legislation, have highlighted that it's not going to solve all the problems overnight, but it will just act as another deterrent or another tool for enforcement agencies to be able to say, actually, no, enough's enough. We've got too many issues with fireworks in this area, so therefore we're introducing this zone. So I suppose, whilst there is issues with enforcement, it is just another tool that can be used to try and tackle the issue. In relation to the criteria, so the criteria for community groups will be set out on the website and what they need to apply. There'll be an online form on the reasons that they think a firework control zone is needed. And a bit like the community asset transfer process, there'll be guidance for them to follow to say this is the information you need to provide. And that initial assessment by the bonfire planning group would then go back to them, and it'd be a bit of a two-way conversation, I imagine, to make sure that all that information is there before it comes anywhere near a committee to make that decision. Or even out to consultation to make that decision. So it's not going to be that a community group's just going to have a blank piece of paper and say, tell us why. There'll be guidance provided to them and a conversation with them to find out what the issues are, whether a firework control zone is the most appropriate way to deal with that, because as I said, there's a lot of other preventative and reactive measures that we have in place already across South Lanarkshire. So it might be that one of them is more suited to tackling the particular issue that community group has. And then in terms of the process going right through to committee, there would be then a report similar to the planning process that's in place, or the community asset transfer reports process that's in place, where you're almost offering a recommendation to committee to say, this is the reasons why we think this is appropriate to take forward. These are the reasons that counteract that, and allow committee to make that decision. So it's not going to be just, as I say, a blank piece of paper and allow people to try and muddle their way through it. It's going to be a guided process by the officers that are involved.
Just supplement, will these guidelines be brought to committee for approval?
Yeah, they could well be. What we'll do, subject to this being approved, and then obviously subject to the amendment required at full council, we'll then sit down with administration services and find the way, just like any new process for committee, is what the best way to provide members with the guidance that they need to make the decisions. So that might be sitting down with area committee chairs, it might be a briefing provided to members, or it might be just that initial conversation at a committee before the applications start coming through.
So I saw Councillor Nelson was kind of button coming on and going off, so I don't know if you Content? Right, okay. Can I come to David Shearer?
Yep, thank you, Chair. What restrictions would be placed if we allegedly established a control zone? What restrictions are placed upon it?
In terms of somebody not being able to do something because they're in a zone. So essentially you can't light a firework in that zone, you can't host people around to have fireworks in your own private garden. So that's why we're keen that there's elected member involvement in those decisions. So it's stopping somebody from using fireworks. So the common kind of issue that you see in fireworks is that, people are setting them off in the street and it's causing fear and alarm to people. This is much wider than that. So whatever the reason that originally stems from that, any zone that's drawn on a map has said that you cannot use a firework within that zone or you cannot launch a firework into that zone. So that's the thing. There are two exceptions. So the exceptions being the sort of handheld fireworks, or sparklers, sorry, as they're more commonly known as, and also public displays. So if we were to, as a council, support or introduce a public display, then that would be exempt from the firework control zone. But it's any private or personal use of fireworks in that zone.
Okay, David?
Chair, thank you. Is there any restriction on the sale of fireworks within a controlled zone?
I'd need to check that. I don't have that detail. But I'll come back to you on that one, Councillor.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that. I think of the useful discussion of all the issues associated with this. I'd remind everyone this is about us establishing the scheme for administering the applications. It's not the points have been made about enforcement, which I think is another issue altogether. And clearly there is concern there amongst the services that would be responsible for enforcing it. Can I draw us back to the recommendations? Can I ask, are we content to agree the recommendations? We're agreed. Thank you very much. Could I take us now to item 8, which is a paper on the consultation on the Scottish Fire and Rescue Services Service Delivery Review. And Jonathan, you're going to speak to this item as well.
Great. Thank you, Chair. So the second community safety related report today then. So the purpose of this one is to provide an update on the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Delivery Review and the consultation that's taken place within that, and also then provide a proposed response from the Council to that consultation for members to approve. Recommendations set out in Section 2 that the overview of the service delivery review be noted and that proposed response is detailed in Section 8 be approved. The background to this starts off a couple of years ago with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service starting the National Service Delivery Review, which aimed to align resources in recognition that their current service arrangements, the financial pressures that they were under, and the issues, including changing demand and their ageing estate, were no longer fit for purpose. So they wanted to do a full review of their service, which would aim to improve the service provided to communities. Section 4 and Section 5 of the report cover the current operating arrangements in South Lanarkshire and in Lanarkshire as a whole. So the fire service operates as a pan-Lanarkshire model, with Lanarkshire being it's one of its key divisions in central Scotland. We've included this detail to allow members to see some context, wider context in relation to the response, which sets out for those that weren't quite clear on how the current operating model works across South Lanarkshire. And Section 6 then covers the conclusions that they've come to from the review. So over the last 24 months or so, they've done analysis, they've done assessments on the level of demand that they have, the estate that they have, and the service that they currently offer to communities. And then they've come up with conclusions as we're listed out at 6.1, and these are specific to Lanarkshire from that, and key changes that they want to make as a result of the review that they've conducted. Section 7 then goes into detail of the consultation options that they're proposing. So there's 23 options selected for across across Scotland, and 2 of these relate to the Lanarkshire area. The 23 options include things like closure, merger or upgrade of fire stations that currently operate, relocation of emergency vehicles to respond to things much quicker, and new work shift patterns in targeted areas for fire service personnel. We've set out the 2 options that impact Lanarkshire at Section 7.4 and 7.5. In Section 8 of the report, we provide an overview of the summary of the consultation plus the proposed response from the Council. This response was informed through discussion with elected members through a dedicated session that we held on the 6th of August, where we had around 20 members in attendance and senior service personnel from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, to allow that discussion on what the implications would be for South Lanarkshire, and proposals from the Fire Service to mitigate any concerns or risks that members had highlighted. In 8.3, we list each of the key aspects of the Council's response. Summary to that, the Council would recognise the need for change from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, recognising that the current operating model is not fit for purpose. And in particular, in relation to the two options, option 2 would be the option that the Council would be most supportive of, has the least implications for South Lanarkshire and actually improves service delivery in South Lanarkshire as well. We've also highlighted some areas where we still have concerns relating to the staffing arrangements that they're proposing to take forward, particularly in Hamilton and Lesmahago, and how they intend to make these sustainable in the long term. The full response that the Council is proposing to submit is available in Appendix 1. And next steps are being subject to approval from Executive Committee. The Council's response will be submitted by the 16th of September, and we expect feedback from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service by the end of the calendar year. Draw Committee's members' attention back to the recommendations at Section 2, so the overview of the consultation be noted and that the proposed response be submitted for approval. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions in that report? I'm not seeing any questions, so can I ask that we agree the recommendations? Agreed. We're agreed. Thank you very much. Come now to item 9, which are the land and property transfers and disposals. And I think Sharon's going to speak to this. Sorry, Craig's going to speak to this. Apologies. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report on pages 63 to 66 is to advise Committee of the actions required in respect of land and property transactions. So in terms of background, details of land and property which are potentially suitable for redevelopment or disposal are circulated to all resources and community planning partners to establish if they are suitable for alternative operational use. And recommendations are made following the consideration of planning, title and other legal constraints. Transactions are only included in the report after successful consultation with the holding resource or resources and planning. Section 4 refers to the non-bulletin disposal, so Appendix A details negotiated transactions where land requires to be declared surplus in order that property services can conclude negotiations for its disposal. The land at Redwood Drive, East Kilbride, which extends to 997 square metres, as shown delineated in the attached plan, is owned by the Council and is subject of an approach by Network Rail. A separate agreement is in place between Network Rail and a third party, whereby Network Rail required to provide access to a proposed development site. So to facilitate this agreement, it is necessary for Network Rail to acquire the council-owned land, as there is no scope for access to be taken from an alternative location. So in terms of the financial implications, the proposed agreement to sell the land is subject to a valuation report to be provided by the Valuation Office Agency, and the terms of any agreement will be subject to approval by either the Housing and Technical Resources Committee or, if appropriate, delegated authority. So if I could just draw your attention to Appendix A. So that's the first line of the report, where we're saying that's subject to a District Valuer's report. We are still waiting for that to come in, although we are expecting it any time. Once we receive that, that will then allow us to start negotiations with Network Rail once received. So if we take you back to section 2 of the report in terms of the recommendations, and the committee is asked to approve that the land detailed in Appendix A, which will be subject of negotiated transaction, be declared surplus to council requirements. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? I'm not seeing any questions. So can we agree the recommendations? We're agreed. Thank you very much. I'm very aware of time, and I'm very aware that we have an item of business that we have to take in private. Can I ask, with the committee's permission, would it be possible to take items 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15? These are all items for noting. Is the committee content to note these en bloc? Agreed. Or does anyone wish to deal with a particular issue? Agreed. We're agreed. We'll note those items en bloc. Thank you very much for your indulgence. That brings us to item 16, urgent business. Though none has been intimated, we come then to item 17, which is the exclusion of the press and public. As the remaining items of business may involve the likely disclosure of exempt information in terms of paragraphs 6 and 9 of Part 1 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973, with which I'm sure you're all familiar, members are asked to agree that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for these items of business. So, are we agreed that we will do that? Yes. Can I just ask the clerk to ensure that we have no press or public present? Can we just check the recording and the live streaming is stopped?